Well, good afternoon, and welcome to Gregory Stewart Surviving with Style. So we woke up this morning to find frost on the pumpkins and the mums that were outside, and it always brings back memories of my childhood. And one fond memory for me is bread pudding. Bread pudding is always something you typically see in the Midwest, sometimes in the South, around Halloween and through the winter months. It is regionally different depending on where you are. I grew up born in Indiana, but raised in Florida and then moved back to Indiana. In the South, our bread pudding was a lot different than it is here in the Midwest. But I'm gonna make a Midwest version that I grew up with, that my mother would make and my grandmother would make. So it's very easy, and I'm gonna tell you the ingredients that you need. 1 loaf of French bread will suffice. So I usually get the long loaf, they're about $2 at the store, and I let them set out overnight to go stale. So you'll put those out to go stale, as I've done here. You will need a teaspoon of vanilla. I took the liberty to go ahead and measure that out. You'll need a teaspoon to a teaspoon and a half of cinnamon. It's your desire of what you like. You'll need a half a cup of raisins. You can use golden raisins or just standard raisins. You'll need 3/4 of a cup sugar, and we use a turbinado sugar here. 2 cups of milk, and then heavy whipping cream. The whipping cream, this is the Kroger brand. It doesn't matter what brand you get. The butter, now you know I consider myself somewhat of a butter snob. I only use Tillamook butter for my recipes. And you'll need 4 tablespoons of butter. And then 4 eggs. Our girls have started laying, so we now have some fresh eggs in the carriage house, and we no longer have to buy the eggs from the grocery store and the local farmers market. So these are the ingredients that you need. Again, 1 loaf of French bread, 3/4 of a cup sugar, half a cup raisins, 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, 1 to 1.5 teaspoons of cinnamon, 2 cups milk, about a cup of cream, 4 tablespoons butter, and 4 eggs. So this is how easy it is. The first thing is we are going to cut, I forgot this. So this is gonna be a gift for a friend of mine. And I go to Home Goods all the time, and they have these lovely little casserole dishes for $12 right now. So I bought all of them they had on the shelf, and it gave me, I don't know, like 8 to 10 of them. And they have these beautiful pictures on them. This one has roses, butterflies, and beetles on it. And it's a nice gift. If you're gonna give something to someone, why not just go ahead and put it in a keepsake that they can have afterwards. So to this, we are going to add the bread. So simply just stack your bread. There's no rhyme to reason of how you do it. Cut it in half, and then cut it in pieces. Now I like French bread, and the reason I use the French bread is because it's crusted on the edge. And if you use just the regular loaf breads that you get in the store, they don't quite have the same texture you're gonna get with a French bread. You can try it either way, and you may like it without the little bit of toughness, if you will, to the edge of the bread. So again, cut it to sizes that are probably 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch. Now, as we add the ingredients to it, it is going to change. So you can have larger pieces or smaller pieces. When all is said and done, this will cook down. Okay, so you can see I now have all of this in the casserole dish. And that sound, if you're wondering, is our 3 miniature schnauzers that just came in from outside, and of course are wanting a treat, so they're making some noise. So here you go, you have your casserole dish. I have added all the bread in there. Next thing you're going to do is take the raisins, and you're just gonna sprinkle those raisins throughout. Now, don't worry about it getting underneath if you're worried about that, because as this cooks, it will start to bubble, and as it bubbles, these start to sink down into the bread pudding. All right, so you can add hazelnuts or any type of nut that you would like. Just make sure that if you do so, you roast them on the stove top first. So I'm going to sprinkle hazelnuts in this. And I'm probably going to use about 1/4 cup, not a full 1/2 cup. And the next thing that we'll need is butter. So what we will want to do is melt that butter. You can do it in a microwave or stove top. I'm going to do it on the stove top real quick because it's just as easy to do it on the stove top as it is in the microwave. And while that is heating, I am going to go ahead and crack the eggs, and you'll want 4 eggs in here. And when you crack your eggs, always put the eggshells aside, and you can put those in the compost pile. Or if you have chickens, you can let them dry out, and once they have dried out, you can crush those eggshells and mix them in their feed. Okay, so the eggs are in here, and we're going to whisk these eggs together. And to that, I'm going to move the eggs to a larger mixing bowl. I'm going to add 2 cups of milk. I'm going to add about 1/2 cup of sweet cream. Now you can measure it, I kind of eyed it, and that'll work fine. Incorporate all of those wet ingredients together. And to that, we will add the cinnamon, the vanilla, then get your whisk out and just whisk it all together. Now, the main reason you're whisking this so vigorously is you want to get that cinnamon incorporated throughout it so it's not stuck together. The butter is about melted. I'm just going to... The sugar, mix it in with the wet ingredients as well. The butter is now melted. And I'm going to simply just pour the butter over the top of this. Again, I'm going to just whisk the wet ingredients one more time so I'm ensuring that sugar is mixed throughout it. And then we're just going to pour all the wet ingredients over this. Now it's pretty wet. As you can see, if I push down on it, you can see it coming up through. I see a little bit of sugar left in here. So this is what it'll look like. As you can see, I may put a little bit more cream over it. Now don't worry that we didn't mix this cream in it. Okay. Now this is ready, and this will go into an oven that's set at 350 degrees for 45 minutes to an hour. At 45 minutes, I will check it, and when I start it, I keep it covered, so I'll put aluminum foil over it, not this lid. It'll go into the oven for about probably 30 minutes. At the 15-minute mark, I'll open it, I'll take the aluminum foil off, I'll let it go another 15 minutes, and then I'll continue to check this because I don't want it to dry out, and I don't want all of this top to get so dry that it feels hard to the touch. We want it to really soak up this sweet milk mixture and cream mixture. And then at about the hour mark, we'll have a beautiful bubbly dessert that looks incredible. So stay with me. I'll show you how to make the bourbon glaze in just a moment. And when this is done, we'll pour the bourbon glaze over it and we have a dessert to beat all desserts. So thank you for hanging in there with me. Okay, so welcome back. Look at this bread pudding. That looks fantastic. So it is really hot right now. I'm letting it cool. So we're gonna make the bourbon glaze right now, but the bourbon glaze doesn't pour over the bread pudding. You actually pull out the individual serving and warm it and put it on a bowl or plate and then pour the bourbon sauce over it. But we're gonna make the bourbon sauce. So it is very simple to make, and you'll need just 4 ingredients. You'll need 1 cup of sugar, an egg that you've beaten really well. You'll need 2 tablespoons to 3 tablespoons of real butter. I use Tillamook. And then you'll want some bourbon. So I am going to use, instead of that, I'm gonna use a straight rye whiskey. Buzzard's Roost is what we'll be using in this today. So first you'll just turn your oven on and we'll put it on a probably low medium heat to melt the butter. And while I'm doing that, on the egg, you'll want to go ahead and just make sure you've whisked that egg very well so it's incorporated and you really can't distinguish the egg white from the egg yolk. And I think I've done a very good job. Again, a cup of sugar. And you'll want a jar. I've taken the liberty to go ahead and wash this jar and sterilize it, and you'll set it aside, and you'll see why we're putting this jar aside in a moment. So the butter's melting, again, over a low medium heat. You don't want this scorched. You don't want to burn your butter, which you can burn butter at a high temperature. Again, we want it at a lower temperature to truly just melt. Okay, so the butter is melted now, and I'm going to pour in 1 cup of sugar. And we'll just mix that together until the butter and the sugar melt together. And it'll make just a lovely little sauce. So I am back, and I actually made a mistake. What I was giving you was the recipe when I make a small batch. In regards to the butter. So we're now back to where we should be. So it is a half a cup of butter, 1 cup sugar, 1 egg beaten, and 2 to 3 tablespoons of bourbon or straight rye whiskey. So I apologize for that. I usually make smaller batches for my husband and myself, and I made a full batch to give to someone, but I am going to show you the top and how that just sets over there. It looks really pretty. Actually, I'll just leave that off to the side. So we're just melting this sugar and this butter together. And again, apologies for leading you astray in the very beginning here. A helpful hint when you are cooking this down is keep it on a low medium heat, because the higher you go with temperature, the more likely you are to scorch the butter and sugar or even burn it. So we're making good progress here. And again, you're going to, slow and steady wins the race with this. You're going to take it very slowly. You want all of the sugar to dissolve. So it can take us a little while to have that happen. You can add extracts to this if you don't want to use a bourbon. It's perfectly fine. Choose an extract that you like. A French vanilla tastes good in this. You can even get creative and try like a pumpkin spice extract. But I am going to do what I grew up with, and that's the bourbon glaze. So we're getting there. I'm gonna say probably 5 minutes it will take to dissolve all the sugar. Now I do stir constantly when I'm melting sugar and butter together so it does not scorch. And again, low heat. So you may be wondering about this egg, and we're gonna pour it in this hot sugar syrup. It is interesting, but if you've well incorporated a beaten egg and you pour it into this while it's warm or even medium heat, the egg's not going to cook like a traditional egg cooks, and you'll see what I'm talking about here in a moment. And a good way to know if you've really melted the sugar is to put a little bit on your finger and feel for the grit between your fingers. And there still is a lot of grit there, so we're going to continue to cook it. All right, so I feel like we're to a good point with that. I'm gonna pour this egg in, and I have a whisk here, and we're just gonna whisk this really quickly. All right, and now we are going to add about 3 tablespoons of bourbon or a straight rye whiskey. Now, the alcohol does cook out, but it leaves the flavor behind. And we're just going to continue to stir until I get this to a boil. All right, there we go. So, we're now going to take the jar, and since this is hot, you'll want to be very careful, and we're just going to pour this into the jar. Set that there. Put a lid on it. And I would usually let this cool, but I want to show you what I'm going to do to it. Since this is going to be a gift, I'm going to put a piece of ribbon around it. And I cut about 1.5 yards of ribbon. And I'm just tying it in a simple bow. And then what I'm going to do is just twirl these ribbons. And then this will go with this. And here is how I will deliver this to my friend. So I hope you can see how beautiful it is and how easy it was to make such a great gift. So I wish you great baking. I hope you take this on. If you have any questions, let me know. If you like what you've seen today, hit the like button. Any suggestions, I'm open to suggestions, and maybe you'll see it in a future episode. So as I always close every episode, remember, embrace inclusion and diversity, and remember, love is love. Take care.